Tokyo, Haneda International Airport. July 1976. The air in the terminal was so thick with humidity and human breath that it felt like you were inside a giant lung that had forgotten to exhale. In this chaos of camera flashes, reporters' shouts, and shoving fans, something happened that caused time to stumble and freeze. A huge hand, looking like the root of an ancient oak, covered in scars and calluses, suddenly broke through the security cordon. It wasn't a friendly greeting. It wasn't a request for an autograph. It was a grapple. A hard, professional, murderous grip on the lapel of Muhammad Ali's expensive jacket. The fabric crackled pitifully, and that sound, trrr, rang out louder than a starter pistol in the instantly ensuing silence. The man who committed this madness weighed 140 kilograms. This wasn't just an overgrown fan. This was Ishiro, a judo champion whose body resembled a concrete slab wrapped in a cheap kimono hastily thrown over street clothes. Have you ever felt a professional wrestler grab you? It's not a punch you can dodge. It's the sensation that a house has fallen on you. In that second, Ali realized he was in a trap with no exit. In the ring, there are ropes, a referee, rules. Here, on the dirty tiled floor of the airport, rules did not exist. There was only the law of physics, mass times acceleration. Ishiro wasn't smiling. His face was the mask of a samurai, decided to die, but take the enemy with him. He pulled Ali toward him, closing the distance to 0. It was every striker's nightmare. A clinch with a grappler 40 kilograms heavier than you. Ali, whose feet usually danced the most beautiful dance in sports history, was suddenly nailed to the spot. His famous speed, his float like a butterfly, all of it became useless. How can a butterfly float if its wings are crushed in the grip of a hydraulic press? But pay attention to one detail. This is that very dagger, which most witnesses missed in the panic, but which will tell you more about this story than any newspaper headlines. In Ali's left hand, hanging loosely by his side, were clutched his favorite aviator sunglasses. Thin gold frames, fragile dark lenses. Survival logic screams, drop them, clench your fists, prepare for impact. If Ishiro executes a throw now, and he was clearly preparing an ogoshi, a hip throw, these glasses will turn into gold dust and shards that will dig into the champion's palm. But Ali didn't unclench his fingers. The glasses remained hanging, swaying to the rhythm of the Japanese giant's heavy, raspy breathing. Why? Was it the paralysis of fear, or the boundless arrogance of a man who believes himself immortal? The crowd around began to panic. People who a second ago were smiling, hoping to see a show, suddenly realized they were about to see violence. Real, ugly violence. Ali's security, stuck in the sea of people, tried desperately to break through, but it was too late. The judoka had already squatted, lowering his center of gravity. It's classic throw mechanics. He was turning his body into a lever intended to flip the greatest upside down and imprint his spine into the floor. Ask yourself honestly, what would you have done when a mountain of muscle drags you into the abyss and your hands are down? Would you have punched? Tried to break free? Ali did neither. He looked straight into Ishiro's eyes. There was no fear in his gaze, which the Japanese man expected to see. There was something else, something cold and calculating, like a surgeon before an autopsy. The situation reached a boiling point. The muscles on the judoka's neck bulged like ship ropes. He poured all his hatred for the Western upstart into this jerk. It seemed we were about to hear the crunch of bones. It seemed Ali's career would end here, among suitcases and frightened tourists, with a humiliating flight through the air. The spectators squeezed their eyes shut. No one wanted to see a legend break. But just as gravity was ready to take over, and Ishiro began to rotate his torso for the final effort, something strange happened. Ali didn't tense up. He didn't resist the force. On the contrary, he made a microscopic movement forward, as if yielding, as if inviting the monster to finish what he started. It was a step into the lion's mouth. Madness? Or a trap that we, mere mortals, simply couldn't see? A silent question hung in the air. Had the greatest given up? Or did he know a secret inaccessible to a man used to solving problems with brute force? Physics is a cruel science, and it states, when 140 kilograms of mass begin to move, it is impossible to stop them. Ishiro jerked. His hips worked like pistons, the kimono pulled tight with the sound of snapping canvas, and the world should have turned upside down. But at that very moment, when the audience already mentally saw Ali sprawled on the floor, something happened that made the brain refuse to believe the eyes. Ali didn't resist. He didn't plant his feet, didn't lean back, trying to break the distance. Instead, he flowed into the movement. Remember how water flows around a stone? Ali took a step right up to the Japanese man, closing the distance to intimate, to absurd. The lever vanished. The inertia of the throw, meeting no resistance, went into the void, and Ishiro, instead of hurling the champion, nearly lost his balance himself, stumbling forward. Did you expect a punch? Did you think that Ali's right hand, the very one that knocked out Sonny Liston, would fly out like a spring? That would be logical. That would be simple. But Ali wasn't playing checkers. He was playing four-dimensional chess. His right hand did indeed fly up, making the crowd gasp, and causing Ishiro to instinctively tuck his head into his shoulders, expecting a blow to the jaw. But the fist didn't touch the face. Ali's palm landed softly, almost paternally, on the giant's tense shoulder. It wasn't a block. It was the kind of touch used to calm a rabid dog. "Easy, son," Ali whispered, and that whisper in the deathly silence of the arrival hall sounded louder than the roar of a Boeing turbine. And here, the soap opera twist kicks in, turning everything upside down. We thought we were seeing a predator attack prey, but when Ishiro froze, breathing heavily, eyes bulging with misunderstanding, we suddenly realized Ali isn't the one in the trap. The judoka is. He was still holding Ali by the lapel. His fingers turned white from the tension, but he could neither throw nor let go. If he tries to throw again, Ali, being right up close, will hit him in the liver so fast no one will notice. If he lets go, he loses face in front of all Japan, admitting defeat without a fight. The greatest turned his grip into his own prison. Sweat rolled down the Japanese man's forehead like hail. He looked into Ali's eyes and saw not fear, but absolute, icy boredom. Now let's go back to that detail that gives no peace. The glasses. Those gold aviators in the left hand? Ali was still holding them. He didn't even squeeze them tighter. They hung loosely on the temple piece, held between his index and middle fingers. It was master-class psychological destruction. Ali's whole demeanor said, "You are so harmless to me that I won't even bother putting my favorite glasses in my pocket." This humiliated Ishiro more than a slap in the face. The giant began to turn red, his face filled with blood, turning into a crimson mask of rage. He realized he was being mocked. He realized he had become a prop in a one-man show. Rage began to displace caution. The muscles in his arm twitched again. He decided to change tactics. If you can't throw, you can strangle. Ishiro began shifting his grip higher, to the throat. The crowd tensed again. This was no longer sport. This was street filth. Fingers capable of breaking bamboo crawled toward Ali's carotid artery. The air became electric again. It seemed Ali would have to react harshly now. Blood would spill. But Ali again did something that pulls the rug out from under you. He smiled. Broadly, dazzlingly. With that very smile millions loved. He leaned close to the ear of the furious giant, ignoring the hand on his throat, and uttered a phrase that should have been his epitaph, but became a spell. None of the journalists heard it then, but by the way Ishiro's face changed, it became clear. Ali said something scarier than physical pain, something that struck not the body, but the soul of the samurai. The Japanese man froze. His hand on Ali's throat trembled, but didn't squeeze. The fire of rage in his eyes went out. giving way to something resembling superstitious horror. What was it? A threat? A curse? Or did Ali, the great manipulator, know something about his opponent that no one else knew? The situation hung in a fragile balance. One wrong move, and one of them dies, or goes to prison. But Ali continued to smile, and in that smile lay an abyss. He slowly began to raise his left hand with the glasses, not to put them on, but to make a gesture that would finally break the reality of what was happening. The spectators felt the resolution was near, but no one, absolutely no one, could predict what it would be. We thought we understood the rules of the game, but Ali had just changed the game itself. Ali's hand continued to rise, and the movement was excruciatingly slow, as if he were overcoming the resistance of invisible water. In that moment, time in the Haneda Airport terminal split. For the crowd, it was fractions of a second. But for the two men in the center of the hurricane, an eternity passed. The gold frames of the aviator glasses glinted under the fluorescent lamps, and that glint was reflected in Ishiro's dilated pupils. You think Ali was going to put the glasses on himself to hide his eyes and go into a defensive shell? That would be logical. That would be safe. But Ali never sought safety. He sought a show. His hand, holding the fragile accessory, floated past his own face and moved further, straight to the bridge of the furious giant's nose. The hall gasped, a single collective sigh of hundreds of people who suddenly realized what was happening. Ali wasn't defending himself. He was dressing up his killer. He slowly, with surgical precision, put his famous glasses on the Japanese champion's broad, flat face. It was an absurd, surreal gesture, violating all laws of a street fight. Imagine, a man capable of snapping your spine with one jerk holds you by the throat, and you adjust his accessories like a stylist before a runway walk. Ishiro froze. His world, built on a rigid hierarchy of strength and respect, had just collapsed. He expected a blow, a block, a scream. He was ready for pain, but he wasn't ready to be turned into a clown. The dark lenses hid his eyes, depriving him of visual contact with the victim, and in that second, he felt like a blind kitten being played with by a tiger. You think this diffused the situation? You think the crowd laughed and the tension vanished? Oh, how wrong you are. In the first second, nervous chuckles did ring out. People always laugh when their brains can't process fear. But look at Ishiro's hands. Look at his knuckles. They didn't unclench. They turned even whiter. The fabric of Ali's jacket began to tear at the seams. Ali's joke didn't calm the beast. It insulted him. For a samurai, there is nothing worse than losing face, and Ali had just taken his face, hiding it behind American glasses. Ishiro let out a sound, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through his arm straight into Ali's chest. It was the sound of a tectonic shift. The situation instantly moved from dangerous to deadly. If before Ishiro just wanted to throw the upstart, now he wanted to destroy him. Destroy him to wash away this shame. Ali felt this change. He saw the veins bulge on the giant's temples under the temple pieces of the glasses. He realized he had pushed too far. Or had he? Maybe this was exactly what he was aiming for. Ali took his hands away. He opened up completely. He stood before the man mountain, who was now blinded by rage and dark lenses, and smiled. But it was the smile of a man on death row. "Now you look like a movie star," Ali said loudly, and his voice was calm, steady, without a shadow of a tremor. But Ishiro didn't know English. He heard only the intonation, and that intonation seemed mocking to him. The giant jerked his arm, sharply, cruelly. Ali's feet left the floor by a couple of centimeters. The crowd shrieked. "It's starting now?" Now Ishiro, not caring about the glasses or the consequences, will imprint the greatest into the concrete. But why isn't Ali resisting? Why does he allow himself to be shaken like a rag doll? At this moment, the viewer experiences cognitive dissonance. We are used to seeing Ali as the master of the situation, but now he looks like the victim of his own pride. Did he miscalculate? Did his legendary instinct fail him, and did he miss the line where the show turns into tragedy? Ishiro began to rotate his torso for the throw. This is no longer a threat. This is action. Centrifugal force began to build. Ali swayed, following the giant's inertia. It seemed all was over, but just as the point of no return was passed, Ali did what no one noticed. His right hand, which seemed to hang listlessly along his body, suddenly came alive. It didn't clench into a fist. It opened. Ali placed his palm on the back of Ishiro's head, from behind, where the skull ends and the neck begins. It looked like a friendly embrace, but any wrestler will tell you, head control is body control. Ali didn't try to stop the throw with strength. He used Ishiro's head like a steering wheel. He pressed slightly, barely noticeably, but it was enough to disrupt the balance of the giant, who was already standing on one leg, preparing for the swing. Ishiro stumbled. His confidence, covered by dark glasses, cracked. He lost the horizon. He stopped understanding where up was and where down was. The dark lenses played their fatal role. Under conditions of stress and movement, they deprived him of peripheral vision. Ishiro panicked. His grip loosened for a second, reflexively, to catch his balance. And into this microscopic sliver of time, Ali inserted his final argument. But it wasn't a punch. It was a word. A single word that Ali shouted right into the face of the blinded giant, and which made the entire airport freeze in deathly silence. Beautiful. This word flew from Muhammad Ali's chest, not as a cry for help, but as a judge's verdict. It hit Ishiro harder than any jab, because it destroyed the very fabric of reality in which the Japanese giant existed. Imagine the state of a man whose brain is tuned for murder, for the crunch of bones, for physical dominance, and suddenly, at the peak moment of aggression, he is called beautiful. It causes a short circuit in the neural networks. Ishiro froze. His hand, still gripping Ali's jacket lapel, didn't unclench, but the deadly energy vanished from it. It became just a holder, a hanger for an expensive suit. The dark glasses on his face, which a second ago seemed like a ridiculous joke, suddenly played their main role, one you wouldn't even guess. You thought Ali put them on him to humiliate him? No. Ali put them on him to blind him? The second Ishiro froze from cognitive dissonance, hundreds of photographers surrounding this strange pair did what predators do when they smell blood. They pressed the shutter. Flash, flash, flash. Hundreds of magnesium lightning bolts exploded simultaneously. For Ali, used to the limelight, this was his native element. But for Ishiro, whose eyes were hidden by dark filters, this light turned into a stroboscopic nightmare. The glasses, instead of protecting, created a mirror trap effect. Ishiro lost his orientation in space. He stopped seeing Ali. He saw only flashes reflecting in the lenses, and felt the champion's heavy hand on the back of his head, which now seemed the only point of support in this spinning chaos. And here happens that very soap opera twist that makes you doubt what you are seeing. We expected Ishiro to rip off the glasses and fly into a rage. We expected him, blinded, to start swinging his arms, smashing everything around. But Ali took a step toward him. He didn't push the giant away. He hugged him. Ali placed his left hand on Ishiro's shoulder, turned to the cameras, and smiled broadly, showing the V for victory sign with his fingers. To an outside observer, to those who would look at the photo in tomorrow's newspapers, it looked as if two best friends were posing after a party. Ali instantly rewrote the context of the situation. He turned an attempted murder into a photo shoot. Ishiro, disoriented, blinded, and bewildered, simply stood there in Ali's glasses, like a giant prop in a one-man theater. But don't be in a hurry to exhale and think the danger has passed. Look at Ishiro's neck. A vein as thick as a finger is still pulsing there. He is still holding Ali. His wrestler instincts are screaming at him, "Break him! Throw him!" He is starting to come to his senses. Through the veil of flashes, his vision returns, and with it the understanding of how monstrously he has just been played. Shame begins to burn him from the inside, and this shame is more dangerous than any rage. The hand on the lapel tenses again. The jacket fabric pulls tight again. Ali feels this. He feels the giant's muscles turning to stone under his palm. This is the moment of truth. If Ishiro decides to attack now, it will no longer be a sports throw. It will be an execution. Ali is too close. He is practically hanging on the Japanese man. Dodging is impossible. Blocking is impossible. What does Ali do? He leans to Ishiro's very ear, so close that his lips touch the giant's earlobe, and continuing to smile dazzlingly at the cameras, utters a phrase that changes the chemistry of the Japanese man's blood. It isn't a threat. It isn't a joke. It is an offer. "If you throw me now," Ali whispers, and his voice is hard as steel, "you will become the guy who beat a boxer. But if you let go, you will become the guy the greatest respected. The whole world is watching. Who do you want to be, a villain or a legend?" It was a grandmaster-level psychological gambit. Ali staked not his strength, but his enemy's vanity. He gave Ishiro a choice he didn't have a second ago. The crowd went quiet. The flashes stopped. Everyone waited for the resolution. Ishiro stood motionless, like a rock. In the dark glasses, he looked like a sinister guardian of the gates of hell. His fingers on Ali's jacket twitched. One finger unclenched, then a second. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the grip began to loosen. It wasn't a defeat. It was a decision. Ishiro took a deep breath, his chest rising like blacksmith's bellows, and he slowly raised his hands, releasing Ali. But he didn't just let go. He made a gesture that made everyone's jaw drop. He took off the glasses, slowly, solemnly, and looked Ali straight in the eye. There was no longer hatred in his gaze. There was something far more terrifying and deep. The realization that he had just been defeated without even being touched by a fist. And in this silence, interrupted only by the hum of air conditioners, Ali took a step back, adjusting his crumpled jacket, and suddenly his face became serious. The games were over. Only the naked truth of the moment remained. Haneda Airport exhaled. That sound was like dust settling after a skyscraper collapse. A quiet but all-pervading rustle of hundreds of people simultaneously realizing they had just avoided a bloodbath. Ishiro stood with his hands down, and in his huge palms, capable of bending steel bars, lay Muhammad Ali's fragile gold aviators. It was the moment of truth when the adrenaline leaves, leaving behind emptiness and trembling knees. The Japanese man held the glasses out back to the champion. It was a gesture of surrender, an acknowledgement of who the real alpha was here. You think Ali took them? You think he put them back on to reclaim his cool image and walk off into the sunset under camera flashes? If he had done that, it would have been just a story about how a boxer scared a wrestler. But Ali wrote myths, not stories. He looked at his glasses lying in the giant's calloused palm, then looked into Ishiro's eyes, which were now open and full of confusion, and did what finally blew the minds of everyone present. Ali shook his head. He gently pushed the Japanese man's hand back, toward his chest. "Keep them," he said so quietly that only those standing in the front row heard. "They hide the fear, and you, my friend, have nothing left to fear but yourself." It was that very intellectual orgasm for which we watch such dramas. That very dagger, the glasses that at the beginning seemed like just an expensive trinket, and in the middle became a tool of blinding, had now turned into a medal. Ali didn't just win. He crowned his enemy, turning a potential killer into his eternal debtor. Ishiro squeezed the glasses. He realized he had just received a lesson not taught in any dojo. True strength is not the ability to break a man, but the ability not to do so when you can. But wait, don't be in a hurry to get sentimental. History has a habit of punching you in the gut when you relax. The moment Ali turned and walked toward the exit, surrounded by his entourage, Ishiro was left standing alone in the middle of the hall. He watched the back of the greatest, and an alternative scenario played out in his head. The scenario where he doesn't release the grip, where he executes the throw, where Ali's head meets the concrete. Ishiro knew the truth that boxing fans were afraid to admit. If the fight had started for real, without cameras and psychology, Ali wouldn't have lasted 10 seconds. Judo does not forgive mistakes. One grip, and it's over. Ali won not because he was stronger. He won because he hacked Ishiro's reality code, replacing physics with psychology. Years later, in a small house on the outskirts of Tokyo, an aged Ishiro would show guests his main relic. Not medals from championships, not black belts, but old, worn aviator glasses with gold frames lying on a velvet cushion. He would tell this story to his grandchildren, but every time he reached the finale, he would fall silent. Because he never found the answer to the main question. Did Ali give him the glasses as a sign of respect, or as an eternal reminder that on that day the samurai chickened out before the jester? This question tormented him until his death. Ali walked out of the airport a winner, but he left Ishiro to live with the burden of an unlived battle. The greatest stole not victory from him, he stole clarity. And now, as the curtain falls, I want you, the audience, to become judges in this invisible tribunal. Cast aside the magic of the name Muhammad Ali. Forget the charisma and titles. Look at the dry facts. 140 kilograms of pure wrestling power against 100 kilograms of a boxer in a tight space with no room to maneuver. Ali won, mentally, yes. But what if Ishiro had been deaf? What if he didn't understand English? What if he simply didn't stop? Who do you think would have walked out of that room alive if psychology hadn't worked? On whose side is the truth of the streets? Write one word in the comments. Technique, if you think the judoka would have broken Ali, or intellect, if you are sure Ali would have found a way to knock out the giant even on the ground. Let's stage the fight in the comments that never happened in 1976. I await your arguments.